Um, Hello everyone. Welcome to this live today. Ahead of the first of Messiah Reparations Rebellion grounding. Um, this is just to get the youth aspect of things. We've got different youth organisations here today. Um, we've got Aditola from XR Youth. I say hi. um, we've got Laura from Rose Must Fall and Alejandra from XR Um, and I'm Sev from TNA, Tribe Named Athari. Um, so I think first, can I just ask everyone to just introduce their groups and say why they're getting involved on the first of Messiah? So I think Laura, if you don't mind answering that.
Sure. My name is Laura Stewart. I'm one of the co-facilitators of Roads Must Fall in Oxford. And we are a group of Oxford students, graduates, and community organizers who believe in the decolonization of the curriculum, of space, and of the academy at Oxford and elsewhere. Our actions are inspired by student movement in South Africa, which started Reds Must Fall in 2015 when a student on the campus of the University of Cape Town threw a bucket of shit at a statue of Cecil John Rhodes, which really started a conversation about decolonization and decoloniality in the academic setting. And obviously our movement has now spread to join solidarity movements, and we're situated in Oxford, but we certainly believe that decolonization and decoloniality are a global project.
That's it. Alejandra, do you want to talk a little bit about XRISN?
Yeah, sure. Hello, everyone. My name is Alejandra, and I'm one of the joint coordinators for Extinction Rebellion Internationalist Solidarity Network, which is ISN for short. And basically, XRISN was set up to build relationships, to work in mutualistic support with existing grassroots movements in the majority world, which is the term that we prefer to use as opposed to the global south, as it is where the majority of the world is. And yeah, it was set up last year, and we've been doing a lot of network building across the world, linking up with grassroots resistance movements. And yeah, we're joining in basically because the co-founders of XRSN are, long lifetime Pan-Africanist reparationist activists who have been really key in this particular reparations rebellion groundings. Mm-hmm. So that's one of the big reasons we're in.
That's Ayatollah, do you want to talk a little bit about XRU and why you're getting involved in the Messiah?
Thanks, Seth. So Extinction Rebellion Youth Group, and particularly Youth Solidarity Group, are we were set up around the same time, over a year ago now, and we've been quite involved in solidarity work as well as campaigning around climate and ecological emergency. So this reparations rebellion is an absolutely essential part of fighting for climate justice in a real sense, rather than just, chanting it. We really, really believe that planetary repairs are the way forward to actually achieve that. So with that in mind, okay, I'll leave it. That's okay.
Okay, that's cool. I guess I'll talk a little bit about Tribe Named Athari, who we are. So TNA, we're a youth-led movement calling for Black liberation and racial justice through direct action, radical education, and healing. We started off like a few months ago following the death of George Floyd and the protests that ensued. We started off just facilitating those, trying to make sure they were organized well, promoting different organizations that were doing it. But we've now transitioned into trying to be an organization based in the community, just being a part of the movement, and doing work in the community to improve, healing, education, just different aspects, because I think that's really necessary. And and that ties into what's happening on the 1st of August, as we've been called in to help get that youth aspect of things, because reparations is a fight that is definitely for young people, but I think we'll get into more of that later. So now I want to ask you guys, as I was saying, what do you guys think is the importance of reparations for young people? I think I'll ask Etola first what she thinks. Yeah.
Why is it important for young people? Simply put, it's our future that we're fighting for in the form of these reparations, and also the futures. I think one of the main things that I would like to say is that, we are, as the youth, we are very indebted to the people who have been carrying out this fight long before we were even born. And I think there are people who've been fighting this for a long time and who've been in the face of destruction and death, and people who we will never hear the names of, that we are absolutely fighting for when we call for these demands. And especially as youth in the global north, it's very important because, for example, XR Youth works with a lot of different youth groups around the world, but we don't necessarily have the same values as XR. And I think a big part of it is this solidarity element, this international solidarity, as is in the name of XRISN. It's very important that we recognise those relationships that have allowed Black liberation to come to the forefront, and actually letting that be youth-led with powerful youth such as yourself. I think, we have to carry on fighting for those reparations for our future and for our ancestors from before as well who've been fighting for it.
Yeah, most definitely. Laura, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I agree very much with what's been said so far. I didn't want to go too far into Rhodes Must Fall's view of reparations per se in the beginning, because I realize it can be long-winded, but by way of very short sort of summation, when we think about colonization, it's a very specific and very dated event, right? It started and ended nominally, but colonization created colonialism. And colonialism is the system of relationships, and the system of relationship that basically creates dispossession and a transfer of economic resources from an indigenous group to a conquering group or the colonizer. And the way that this was done, or the way that it was made to seem okay, was through claims of a civilizing project, right? So they were coming to Africa, for example, to bring Christianity or bring commerce, or bring light to the dark continent. And so those civilizing claims create systems of power, and systems of power that are then upheld by institutions and structures which maintain this colonizer-colonized relationship. And so that's where RMF comes in, especially from the education sector, which is that education, at least in the Western sense, so in the sense of institutions like Oxford and Cambridge and other Russell Group universities, is part of this structure that was created to maintain colonial relationships. And so if colonial relationships were built to extract resources on the claims of these racialized ideas, then our goal should be not only to bring, to bring light to that relationship, but also to call for it to be reevaluated and for it to be abolished, really, because it's unjust. And it's an unequitable relationship. And so in the academic sector, we see reparations as being addressing epistemicide, which is very much like genocide that was done in Africa via colonization. Epistemicide is then how colonization or colonialism now washes away the histories, the knowledge, the contributions and achievements of Black and Indigenous communities, and instead whitewashes them so that our celebrations and the channeling of economic resources continues to be towards white white people. So when we think about reparations, we think about it in terms of taking back those resources, especially in an academic setting, scholarships to African students, hiring more Black lecturers, including more Black literature in reading, and really contending with Black or non-white ways of knowing. And this is important because we see that relationships, so education is just one, it says the live is paused apparently. So should we wait for it to, okay, it's up and running again. So education is just one stopping point for a lifetime relationship or a lifetime structure of colonizer and colonized. And when we think about reparations, then it's important for youth because youth stop off in education and go off into the workplace, into buying homes, looking for loans to start businesses. And that relationship of colonizer, colonized permeates the lifetime of Black and Indigenous youth. And so ours is to interrupt that relationship and to call for the resources to be returned or to be equitably shared where they're supposed to be. And this is obviously vital because it's an existential question.
Yeah, most definitely. Alejandra, what are your?
Yeah, I mean, first, just wanted to say, like, totally back what both Adi and Laura were saying. I think for me, personally, like, reparations is a concept that I just recently became like closer with now and trying to learn more about it and what it means. And to me, from what I've seen so far, what it basically represents is like power shifting, just how this, I think what you talked, Laura, about the way this kind of colonial system has narrowed and funneled power to a very small minority of the world, primarily, you know, white, cis, like, all the tags you want to put them, men. And it's an issue of kind of taking back that power and changing the whole way in which we relate to each other, to the world, to the land as well, because I think that's a key issue, and it's something in ISN that we really try to also hammer home, the fact that reparations is also planet repairs. Yeah, I mean, I don't want to go on for that much longer, but I think especially for young generations, it is a task for us to, well, for those like me who are new to this, to learn more about it. And like, with just knowing, I feel like what I do is just, it is impossible to avert the climate and ecological crisis, you know, essentially like the genocide of millions of people without this reparatory process. And like, yeah, if we want to change things, it's only going to be this way. So I think it's vital for young people to kind of get on board and be open and just, yeah, get on it.
Yeah, most definitely. I think just to add on to what you all brilliantly said, it's about, I think reparations represent a fight for a better future. And as young people, like, that is our fight because we are the future. So I feel like young people need to understand that we are a part of this process, because reparations represents an internal, us taking agency, I think, as Ali, what you were saying, away from the oppressor and taking control, true control over our liberation and our futures. And yeah, I feel like we as young people, if we really want to do that well in the community, we have to be a part of that discussion and we have to be heard, which is why I think young people need to come down on August 1st and be part of that process, definitely. So yeah, what do you guys think about the importance of intergenerational communication and learning in our community? Laura, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think it's vital. I think Roads Must Fall is an example of what intergenerational conversations look like in a very short span way, but also in a much larger sort of systemic way. So, you know, our movement was inspired by students here at Oxford and in South Africa who started this work in 2015, 2016. Many of them have since gone off into the workplace, but we definitely maintain a sort of intergenerational structure within RMF. So there's RMF 1 who started this movement at Oxford, and then we are now RMF 2. There's RMF, Mothership, who started the movement in South Africa. So we see ourselves as an intergenerational movement in that sense. And that's important within university spaces because our experience or our time here is punctuated obviously by graduation. So we come in, we become radicalized, we organize, and then we leave. So continuity in that sense is vital in our space. But more importantly, on a meta level, there have obviously been conversations about reparations, anti-Black racism, equity that have been going on since the beginning of colonialism. These are not new conversations. So the conversation that we are having at Oxford about roads was being had in 1890. Students in 1890 were saying, this man is abominable. He shouldn't be awarded an honorary degree. This money shouldn't be accepted. His statue shouldn't be, on the university campus. And similarly, the conversation on reparations, we have various Pan-Africanist African leaders who are calling for reparations, calling for discontinuation of this colonizer-colonized relationship with Europe and with other developed, as it was, countries. And so if we punctuate the conversation, or if we don't allow intergenerational discussion, then we're almost starting from scratch every time we start this discussion. And yet we know that white supremacy and institutional racism function in such a sophisticated way like they do, because they are very much aware of posterity. And so, even when there's not a white person in the room, they've ensured intergenerational discussion so much that the system of whiteness will perpetuate itself. And so we really, as decolonial reparations movements, have to make sure that whatever we're doing isn't momentary, which a lot of media is trying to make our work seem. We're in the BLM moment. We're in the Roads Must Fall moment. This is a movement. It's a continuation. It's an intergenerational discussion. And that's important because it means it's not going away. And so when we think about how we engage with communities, how we engage with each other, it has to be with the goal that whatever we do in this moment today is going to be useful for the discussion tomorrow, because tomorrow is always going to be hopefully a little bit more equitable and a bit closer to our goal of a radicalized sort of future that we really can't imagine right now, because it means all of the things that we think are normal would be gone. So universities, the way that we see them, business, lending, the way that we see them would be gone. And so, yes, an intergenerational discussion is vital between ourselves as young people, and then also between ourselves as movements at different stages in their development, and finally as movements in conversation with older generations. And we can see that through literature, for example, older generations who've contended with the work.
Yeah, definitely. I think to add to that, at the rally that we did on Friday, the importance of that was just to create discussion between people, a space for discussion within our community, because part of reparations is internal repair within our community, and discussion is so key to that. And we had an elder, Kofi, who you guys know, who came through and spoke so brilliantly, and he really just emphasized that there needs to be a reciprocal nature between the relationship between older generations and younger generations, understanding that we can learn from the experience of past generations, but that we also have the responsibility to take that advice on and action it. As Ali was saying earlier, the climate struggle means that action must be taken now. We don't have time, so we really have to take the experience and advice from the older generations, but action it in our own way. I think that's very important. But Adi, what are your thoughts?
Thank you for that, Laura. I think that's a really important part of it as well. Instead of the reciprocal nature, I feel as though it's not quite there at the moment with youth activism, if you want to call it that. But these sort of intergenerational conversations are exactly the thing that white supremacy doesn't want to happen, as Laura's just emphasized, you know, and we're constantly in the situation of reinventing the wheel, and then we don't allow ourselves to have the same, as Laura's described, you know, they have their own self-perpetuating system. We don't have those knowledge streams through generations in the same way. So to not reinvent the wheel and to learn from the existing struggles that are already there, because it's that constant erasure of those lessons that are learned from that, because for that exact reason, like you're not told how to fight the system, because the system is indoctrinating you. And on a personal level, as like a youth who's grown up in the diaspora, you know, we experience this extreme level of educational racism as well. I think that the only way that I at least have seen the effects of that being broken down is through actual intergenerational learning and sharing. And, you know, there's a lot of tradition and a lot of knowledge that we just don't have as easy access to. And it's from those relationships that we have that we're going to be able to actually heal internally, as you said. I think that's a very important part of it, because there are deep intergenerational wounds there. And I think that I want to talk a little bit about the exhibit that's taking place on the 1st of Messiah, because there's the Sankofa Safarinta exhibit. It's called the Pan-African Internationalist Solidarity Street Exhibit. And the word Sankofa actually means that you learn from you move forward, but only from learning from the past. And I think this is an element that has been lost a lot as well within, especially people who've left motherland. Basically, it's very difficult for us to do that within the current society that we live in. Everything's individual. Everything's, you know, you are going to solve this. That's the wrong approach. The absolute opposite approach to what's taking place on the 1st of Messiah, which is actual relationship building and sharing in an intergenerational way, giving examples of internationalist solidarity and how, like, we actually learn from what went well, what didn't go well from those struggles. And I think that's a really good way for us to do that, and to actually have some release from the menticide that's been going on for centuries.
Most definitely. Alejandra.
Yeah, so I think intergenerational dialogue and relationship building is key. It's fundamental for things to work. For both, like, you know, if you have no youth being involved in the movement and continuing, then it essentially kind of dies, whatever you're doing. And I think it was really interesting what you said, Laura, about that kind of whiteness, or these systems having their self-perpetuating system, and that they have what they've done really well is like destroying that in other things that are other from whiteness. And it is that, you know, robbing us from our heritage, from our history, from like our ancestors, and denying us our right to self-determination, to be kind of proud and in who we are, in our own skin and everything. And I think it's kind of counteracting that, and we can only do that through building those bridges that have been broken between generations, basically. For, you know, and I think it's really important what you said, Sev. It's also a healing process. And I guess something I wanted to say is that often intergenerational sort of learning, it's often seen as like the younger learning from the older, but I think it's something that goes both ways, because equally places that do not kind of accept, you know, where it just works one way, unidirectional from like older to younger, then they're also at risk of not kind of, I don't know, changing or adapting or being open to other ways. I think it's equally as important to have those things coming from both ways, because we have intrinsically things that are unique and very valuable in different circumstances. And I think youth have a lot of vitality, energy, power, and ability to imagine and be creative. But at the same time, there's a lot we can learn from our elders. And we, kind of make sure that those kind of relationships go both ways.
Yeah.
Yeah, I also think this idea of intergenerational conversation, and this is something that's been really brought up to Roads Must Fall in Oxford by, I would say, activists in the Oxford community. And I think it was Alejandra mentioned the same, this disjointing of relationships within our communities. We, part of the feedback that we've received is that there isn't enough of a sense of community between students within the university and the people who work in the town of Oxford. And even that imbalance in relationship is definitely a structural, institutional thing that was created purposefully because continuity and solidarity is bad for white supremacy. Because if your struggle and my struggle can be linked like this, it means that it continues in a way that becomes very uncomfortable and problematic for maintaining the status quo. And so, intergenerational discussion should also be considered in terms of looking outside of the situationalness of our praxis or our practice as reparations or decolonial movements, and looking at who is around us, who are the communities and people that live around us, what are their struggles, how do they intersect with ours, because all of these are maintained by, created by white supremacy. So I guess I mentioned that as one point, but a separate point is definitely that we, we've received a lot of that feedback and we've tried to incorporate it as Roads Must Fall. So we are having an open conversation, which I hope other people who are watching this or who are in your network will join on Thursday, and it's on our Instagram page at Roads Must Fall Oxford, where we'll be having a conversation about what it looks like to build a movement that's inclusive and that listens to community voices and not just the voices of, academics or graduates of Oxbridge. And so that's just as important. I think it's youth, for example, in the city of Oxford, being able to engage with the movement that's happening or that's being enacted by students at the University of Oxford.
Yeah, most definitely. And I think that manifested itself on Friday at the rally, where we had different generations coming out and there was just discussion. And at times it can be combative because there is definitely a generational gap between how we view certain topics. But I think these things cannot get resolved unless we have that space for discussion within the community. And as I was saying earlier, that is part of the reparations process. Like, this process is underway now. Like, we can take the agency and action to work to heal ourselves and try and understand a different perspective, because at the end of the day, as you were saying, Laura, we are all oppressed under this system of white supremacy. And if we truly want to liberate ourselves, we have to take agency over our own communities. But yeah, most definitely. So I think last I want to ask you, what's your message to the youth that are thinking of coming down on the 1st of Messiah? What you would say to them? Alejandra, maybe, if you want
to. I think I would just like to say to any youth to basically definitely come, and like, especially, I think often people seem to think like, oh, this is, African Emancipation Day, so I cannot go if I'm not African, or how is this related to me? Like, oh, this is an issue for Black people, it doesn't concern me. Like, I support it, but like, or often like feel really awkward about being in these kind of spaces. And I think, for example, like, I'm like Colombian, and like, for me, I see it as like, it's equally as important as any other African heritage person to be there and to be involved and to learn and to also kind of feed in with my experiences as well, because I think it's about also bringing communities together, communities who in different kind of like size, but they've also been at the close of the same system. Like what like to say the Abya and like indigenous communities as well. And a lot of our peoples who've also, our communities have been disjointed across the majority world in the global south. And we've been very much affected by the same white supremacist systems. Not saying that everyone's experience is the same, because I know for sure, like people, you know, Afro-Colombians, for example, would have a completely different experience to me as someone who's like of mixed heritage. But I think it's for bringing communities like together and just like being in these spaces and to see that this battle is as important for you, whether, you know, you're of European heritage or African heritage or whatever, because at the end of the day, we need this for our own survival, but also for our own humanity as well, I think, to you kind of regain that human family and that piece of humanity that's being sort of kind of squashed and you don't see it, and regain that as well.
Yeah, most definitely.
But, yeah.
So I put Laura.
Yeah, wow, so much to say to young people about coming to this action. I'll try to limit it to 2 points. The first point is that this moment that the media wants to call it, that we're in, is being called the largest civil rights movement in history. I mean, the protests that we're seeing, the actions that we're seeing, if you look at Portland, Oregon, for example, where the federal government in the United States has called the federal guard to come in and try to break up protests. I know the American Civil Liberties Union has recently put an injunction or put a stop to that. But you know, if you look at what is happening around the world right now, we are in, I mean, it's the 20s. It really is up there with all of the 20s that we remember. The 1820s, the 1920s, you know, these are the 2020s. So if you ever imagined what you would be doing if you were there in Nazi Germany, if you were there during world wars, if you were there during the civil rights movement, if you were there during the anti-apartheid struggle, this is exactly where we are right now. So I can remember, I mean, I'm 28 now, so I'm still just youth. But I can remember being in high school and learning about, you know, the American civil rights movement and people like Nelson Mandela, Winnie Madikizela Mandela, and other anti-apartheid icons, and thinking, oh my God, if I was there, I would have been, you know, I would have been at the uprisings, I would have been marching. And I feel like finally we have a moment as youth to draw on this history, this anti-human, oppressive, violent past that we all come from as a global community. We have a chance really to channel our feelings against that and just show up. Like, all you have to do is show up. You just have to be there. You just have to be there. And by virtue of being there for posterity, so for the future, we capture, for the first time in history, which is a really wonderful thing about things like Instagram and Facebook and Twitter, we get to capture and put out to the rest of the world what people here right now in the UK feel about white supremacy, racism, oppression, austerity of our government. So how government is cutting funding for public health, cutting funding for the unemployed, for disabled people, for the LGBTQI communities. All you have to do is be there to like show them what our wrath as young people is and what it looks like when we organize and what we can do as a collective. That's the first thing. You just have to be there. If you ever imagine what you would have done, all you have to do is be there, whether you're white, black, etc., as Alejandra mentioned. The second thing is, this movement that we find ourselves in is about a crisis of opportunity, right? So Black, Indigenous, people of color, and actually low income or non-billionaire white people, we're all in the same boat. we're in the same boat. We're in different quarters, obviously, so we experience the storms differently. But we're in the same boat, and the boat is sinking. The boat is sinking right now, and all of us need to come together to plug up the holes in the cabins, to pull some of these people out of first class and wake them up to what is going on in the world. And this is just one of many opportunities I hope for the rest of this year to show up and show out how we support each other, how we love each other, how we hold each other in community. So if you're Black and you have white friends, all of you white friends need to be there. Otherwise, we're unfriending you on Instagram, like we're unfriending you on Facebook, or we're not following you on IG. But this is really I think, remarkable opportunity for young people to show each other and the rest of the world what it looks like to hold each other in community.
Most definitely. Alejandra, you wanted to say something?
Oh yeah, it goes Adi first, then I'll just say. Yeah? Okay. So I think I just want, one of the things that I wanted to say, it's, well, basically that this kind of reparations, rebellion, groundings is so much more than just a day event. Like, it'd be very sad if, we had a lot of young people turn up there like, whoa, yeah, this is great, and then don't do anything for the rest of the year, or just stay at home. So I think that it's cool for like the young people turning up to see this as the beginning of a journey, and like it's something that you just carry on being like every day and learning every day. And to not, the second thing is to not be intimidated about the fact that you might not know certain things. So, or like, oh, I'm not an expert in, like reparations or talking about white supremacy, or like often you get a lot of this like terminology, which is a way of kind of talking about your experience and stuff, which is really useful, but it can be quite new for a lot of young people to just be like, that's like fine, and be open to learn, and like not, that doesn't mean like you're not equally as valued in that space. But yeah, just I think the main thing is that it's just the start of a journey, and that we're all learning in this journey together, and that it doesn't end, when we put down the tents and stuff on the 1st of Messiah, basically.
Yeah, most definitely. Adi, did you want to answer? I was going to answer, but you go.
I haven't answered the question yet, the original one yet. You can go though. Sorry, Seth. I just wanted to talk a little bit about, this idea of what planet repairs is, because I think this is really important for us to, as youth, to understand that, this is the time. There is no other time otherwise. I mean, it already feels like it's too late when you see on the ground what is going on in the global majority, and the people who are on the front lines defending their land and facing continued attacks in various forms. When you, I really, really want to emphasize the fact that the solutions are there already. The solutions are there, and they've been erased from our minds, from us being aware of them. We've got indigenous knowledge there as well that's been consistently ignored, and there are solutions there already. And we also do need to remember that even when it comes to reparations, we're not talking about giving money. We're not just talking about money. Emphasis on the just, okay? Because there is no amount of money, as Kofi said in Oxford, there is no amount of money that can repay one of my ancestors' lives, okay? There is no amount of money. So when we talk about reparations, it's about trying to even the scale a little bit, just a little bit. So when it comes to these planetary repairs, this is the most effective way to do it. If people actually are saying, Black Lives Matter, okay, Black lives on the continent of Africa matter as well. This struggle affects the youth of the world in the global majority as well so much. And I think as youth, we have to remember, if we're in these positions, we have a voice, we have to actually be continually fighting for it. I mean, the people who have been fighting for these reparations have actually made gains, and why is it we're not aware of them? You know, these are the things we have to question about where are we getting our knowledge from, because constantly they're funneling ideas into our head and indoctrinating us with these things. So I think it's very important for youth to come there and learn and make connections on the day, but also to go from there as well, and to actually fight for this sort of holistic reparations rather than just financial, because we know that the systems, even if you give it to the Black leaders in, for example, where my dad's from, Nigeria, okay, you know that is not going to reach an ordinary Black person who is, you know, farming, like subsistence farming, for example. You know that's not going to reach them. So who are the reparations for? That's what we have to ask. How is the most effective way? And we're going to be having those discussions. And you're absolutely right, Ali, to point this out as a journey. I forgot to mention the second part of the Sankofa Safarinta exhibit. The safari is the journey. You know, we're not saying that we've learned everything from all of these examples of solidarity, otherwise we wouldn't need them much. Sorry, the Brazilian groundings, we wouldn't need them. So it's a journey, and just please come and get involved, because there's a lot to do. So yeah.
I would say, to answer the question, like people, young people, we definitely need to be out, because this is our fight. Like as everyone has echoed, this is a fight for the future, and as I said earlier, we are the future. So yeah, I'm just calling all of us to come out. There's going to be music, food, dance, good vibes. Like, everyone just roll out. It's going to be a good day. Like, people turn up. It's definitely going to be a good day, man. It's definitely going to be a good day. I think we might have time to answer some questions that have been put through to us. So let me go up. Okay, so the first question is, in the USA, they will only pay reparations to a state or country. Is it the same in the UK, that we as Black people will have to declare ourselves as one to receive reparations? Laura, do you want to answer this? Maybe?
I had a feeling that you would ask me this, and I was just preparing to tell you that my legal grasp on reparations and the legality of reparations is very limited. But I think what's already been said is worth impressing, which is reparations isn't just about the material cost of slavery of enslavement, or the material cost of each African who loses a life, etc. These are innumerable amounts and innumerable losses. I think what we have to focus on, instead of this trajectory of trying to find a number and who's going to get paid, is what is the damage that has been done? So there's damage that's been done. We can see it in systems of racialized policing. We can see the damage being done in access to opportunity and access to lending, access to healthcare. So there is a medical industrial complex that treats Black people fundamentally differently to how it treats white patrons. So let's focus on where the harm has been done and how we rectify that harm. And some of these are very easy answers. Hire more Black doctors, train more Black nurses, pay people a living wage, do away with, so abolish the prison industrial complex. Let's find another way that we're going to hold people accountable to systems of justice and accountability in general. So let's maybe turn away from the legality, because my background is in environmental law, so I have a little bit of a grasp on the law. And what I can say as a decolonialist or anti-oppression activist about the law is that the law is not engineered or created to offer reparations for this type of issue. So you're not going to find a legal precedent or a legal or policy way within the status quo to get the type of justice or accountability that we're looking for. What we are saying is, outside of these systems of oppression, the law, that have been built to oppress us, how do we organize and collectively reimagine a future that is more equitable and more just? And if we can focus on that, then the type of work that we can do is much more meaningful than a court case to get a couple $100 million, because a couple $100 million is just not going to cut it.
Most defo. I don't know if anyone wanted to jump, but like, just to echo what you're saying, I think this goes back to us shifting the narrative away from the oppressor, and and taking agency over what reparations look like to us. Because a key part of reparations is also ensuring that the Mangamizi, or colonialism, neocolonialism, the enslavement and trafficking of African peoples does not occur again. And if we want to ensure that, reparations has to be on our terms. And yeah, that means that we have to decide within ourselves what we want, and that means community discussion, like the First and Messiah groundings, healing, education between our community, to achieve this. So yeah, I would say, to answer the question, as Laura was saying, we've got to move away from the systems of the oppressor, the narrative of the oppressor, and take agency over what we want reparations to look like to us. But yeah, anyone else want to jump onto that? Okay. Let me see if we've got time for another question. Okay, someone asked, can Black liberation intersect with queer liberation? Adetola.
Can it? It has to. Not can it. It has to. Otherwise, it's not Black liberation. So yeah, we also know, this is the thing. A lot of people try to distract by asking some questions about this. Okay, but what about homophobia in the community? All of this, all of that. There are Black queer people. If you care about the liberation of all Black people, then you will care about queer liberation as well. That is just, we have to be intersectional with these things. Otherwise, you're only getting half of this. You're just not you're excluding people when you do that, and that's not liberation in any sense of in the form. That's just another form of colonization. So,
anyone else want to answer that? I think that's all I put it perfectly, but then cool. We've got 10 minutes. There's another question. How can we build strong autonomous communities in the big cities such as London? Does anyone wanna? I can answer if anyone. If not,
Yeah.
Okay. In my head, I think it's about, if we want to build community, events like the First of Messiah is key, because that is grounded in community action. We at TNA emphasize that as well, working in tandem with the community in the cities that we're based in. So it's a thing where we are working together to liberate ourselves, because if we want to liberate ourselves, it has to be like, we have to take agency within our community to do that. So yeah, I don't know if that answered the question, or if anyone else wants to jump.
I don't live in London, but I guess it's like big cities in general. But I just thought to give, for me, I think like building community anywhere really, it's, I think it's like a massive and important thing to happen. And like, I guess some of the ways in which I've started sounds like really stupid, but just like, why is everyone sorry, it's just my family here. They're just like staring at me, and it's really putting me off. But yeah, I say like being able to talk to your neighbors and reclaiming, I think, community space is a key thing in order to be able to create that community. Just having spaces in which we can go and actually be there and have time to just talk to each other. Because one of the massive things that have happened in the last years with this neoliberalism system that we have, it's getting rid of community-owned spaces, autonomous spaces, because they know the power that lies when people get together and actually chat and start realizing that their experience that they thought was individual to themselves is actually a collective experience. And then you begin to see that, hang on, me having, to slave away this many hours, receiving this treatment from my husband, being kind of racially abused in the tube, it's not just something that happens to me. It's not like one bad apple. It's actually a systemic thing, a thing that's happening to everyone. So you actually start to be like, things are fucked up, and perhaps there's a bigger problem and there's something that we should do. So I think it's a key thing to reclaim these spaces, create your own, just do it. And I think that's like a stepping stone to begin this. I think one of the very few places that are left in terms of community are pubs, but then you need money in order to go to a pub with someone, and you need to get like drunk. But there used to be so many more before, and there's like different forms, like youth clubs, like if you're talking about like youth self-determination and things like that are key. And that's pretty much my contribution around this thing.
Yeah, I agree. I think, as you were saying, one of the oppressor's tools is to divide us, and the emphasis on the individual that is in place in a capitalist society works to do exactly that and stop us realizing that collectively we are so strong. So yeah, I think in the big cities, not just in the big cities, but everywhere, we need to be connecting. And as that's the only way we can truly get liberation, is if it's between all of us in the community. So yeah. Does anyone else have anything they want to add to that? Or okay, cool. Sorry, Alejandra.
Can you repeat it again? Sorry, my internet lagged. And I
I was just
hear
saying
you.
if anyone else had anything they wanted to add, but they were good. So yeah, to wrap up. Oh, did you want to say something or?
Yeah, basically, I wanted to ask, because this is something for the youth to do as well. One of the things that we are hoping to do is, with the exhibit, lay faces on the road that we are blocking, maybe blocking in Brixton. And those faces should be, yeah, I do love the exhibit, but the reason why is because all of those faces and all these stories of our ancestors and of people who've actually been fighting this that we don't know about. And I constantly think about how many of those Black faces we don't know about. Yeah, we're talking about the traffic of African people, and 1 million at least of them did pass away. But that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about all of the faces that have had to suffer all the other forms of white supremacy that we don't know about. So anyway, I'm asking the youth to bring a face of someone who has inspired them and who has been fighting for Black liberation in whatever form that may be. And it doesn't have to be a person of African heritage, but it's these people who have fought for our people. And it's very important that we share those stories. And so if you please bring a face, a painting, a picture, whatever you want to do, and it should be beautiful to see if we pull it off. And the only way we're going to pull it off is if you guys pull it off with us. So that's what I'm saying.
Yeah, most definitely. Laura or Ali, did you have any closing statements that you want to say?
I just wanted to say thanks.
No? Okay. Well,
Sorry, I was on mute. Yeah, I think just thank you so much for giving us the opportunity to join your conversation, and we're as Rhodes Must Fall Oxford looking forward to the event on the 1st, and we hope that as many people who can make it will be there.
Yeah, most definitely. Thank you.
Really looking forward to meet you all in social distancing person.
Most definitely. Thank you guys for hopping on here to discuss. I think this has been very important, very informative. So yeah, just to wrap up, everyone, please come down on the 1st. If you don't, you're missing out, because it's going to be good vibes. Learn in discussion. Everyone will get an opportunity to voice how they feel, because that's what we need in the community, discussion between us. That is so important. So yeah, especially all the young people, please come down, because this is our fight as well. So yeah, thank you, everyone.
Yeah, we will unfriend you on Facebook otherwise.
Yes, definitely.
Like Laura's.
All right.
Bye.
Did you end it? Did you end it?
Did you end it?
Cool.
God.
We were like, bye. What am I pressing?
You know what to do. Oh, that was good though. Thank you guys. You all spoke so well.
Yeah.